Got a BF. Delete me. That's all the message said. 4 words. No explanation. No emotion. Just a digital execution. I stared at my screen for a full minute, waiting for the punchline. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe she sent it by mistake. But when I tried to reply, message failed to send. When I called, user blocked you. Every trace of her was gone in seconds. Instagram, blocked. Snapchat, blocked. Even Spotify, our shared playlists, wiped clean. I sat there, phone buzzing with silence, replaying her voice in my head. You're the only one who makes me feel safe, Ethan. Safe. Right. I walked outside just to clear my head. The night was cold, and my hoodie still smelled faintly like her perfume. That's when I saw her. Under the streetlight. Laughing. Wearing my hoodie. And the guy beside her, he looked exactly like me. Same build. Same walk. Same damn haircut. My blood froze. She'd replaced me, down to the detail. And in that moment, one thought carved itself into my mind like a whisper I couldn't silence. If she replaced me, then who the hell did I become? I've always been the quiet one in any room, the kind of guy who listens more than he talks. I never craved attention. I was fine being the background hum in other people's lives. Until I met her. Lena was the kind of person who commanded noise. She laughed loud, spoke fast, and filled every silence like she was afraid of what might crawl out of it. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, one I almost skipped. I remember standing by the window, pretending to text someone, when she walked up and said, "You look like you're plotting an escape." I laughed. "You're not wrong." She smiled, the kind that felt like sunlight cutting through cold glass. "Well, if you leave, I'm coming with you. You look like the only sane one here." That was Lena. Bold. Unfiltered. Beautiful in a way that didn't even feel real. We started talking that night, about music, movies, weird dreams, and we never really stopped. Our first date was a midnight walk through empty streets, coffee cups in hand. She told me about her messed up childhood, her fear of being forgotten, how she hated people who made promises they couldn't keep. I told her I'd never do that to her. She looked up at me then, eyes reflecting the dim streetlight, and said, "You feel safe, Ethan. Like an anchor." I didn't know it then, but that word would stick. She called me her anchor every time she got anxious, every time she doubted herself. When she got passed over for a job, I was there, takeaway boxes, cheap wine, and a playlist we made together called Storms and Shelters. When I got offered a promotion that meant moving 2 hours away, she cried. "I can't do long distance," she said softly, her hand trembling mine. I'd lose my mind. So I turned it down. Told my boss I needed stability. He didn't understand, but Lena smiled like I'd just saved her world. "You're the only one who gets me, Ethan," she whispered that night as we lay in bed. I kissed her forehead and said, "And you're the only one who'd stay even if I lost everything." Our life became a rhythm of small, quiet rituals. Every Sunday morning, we made pancakes. She always burned the first batch, and I always pretended to like them. On weeknights, she'd fall asleep on the couch while I worked on my laptop, her legs draped over mine, half a movie still playing in the background. Sometimes she'd mumble in her sleep, "Don't go." We had this habit of leaving each other little notes. I'd find them in my jacket pocket or on the bathroom mirror. "Breathe. You're my calm. Don't forget milk." It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. And real was enough for me. The small things made us us. The way she'd hum off-key while brushing her hair. The way I'd warm her hands in mine when they were cold. The way she'd look at me across a crowded room like I was the only person there. We didn't fight much. When we did, it was over dumb things, dishes, missed texts, who forgot to buy groceries. But we always came back stronger. That's what I believed, anyway. Then came the changes. It started subtly, like a draft through a closed window. She began checking her phone more. Smiling at messages she wouldn't show me. Her hugs grew shorter. Her kisses, distracted. One night, I found her sitting in the dark, staring at her reflection in the window. "You okay?" I asked softly. She blinked, like she hadn't noticed me there. "Yeah. Just, tired." I sat beside her, wrapped my arm around her shoulders. "Work again?" She hesitated. "Something like that." Her voice had that distant echo, like she was already somewhere else. Still, I didn't question it. Lena was always a little moody, a little restless. I figured it was stress, deadlines, family drama, whatever it was. Everyone drifts sometimes, right? But the drifting didn't stop. She started working late, projects, she said. Sometimes, she'd come home smelling like a cologne that wasn't mine. I'd ask gently, "Rough night?" She'd smile thinly and kiss my cheek. "You worry too much, Ethan." And just like that, I'd let it go. I told myself she loved me. I told myself we were just going through a phase. Because love, I thought, was supposed to bend without breaking. I remember one night in particular, we were sitting on the floor, eating instant noodles at 2 a.m. because neither of us could sleep. She looked at me and said, "Do you ever wonder what it would be like to start over? Like, completely new?" I laughed. "What, like witness protection?" She didn't laugh. Just kept staring at the steam curling from her cup. "No, like, wiping the slate clean. Being someone else." I remember frowning. "Why would you want that? You've built so much." She smiled faintly, but her eyes were far away. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living the wrong version of my life." At the time, I thought it was just another one of her philosophical moods. Now, I know better. Back then, I still believed we were unshakable. I didn't see the signs. Didn't hear the silence between her words. I didn't feel her slipping away, piece by piece, until one morning I woke up to an empty side of the bed and a message that would rewrite everything I knew about her, and about myself. But that was still ahead of me. For now, I was still the quiet guy who thought love was enough to keep someone close. And she was still my anchor. Or at least, I thought she was. It started with little things, small, forgettable moments that didn't seem worth worrying about at first. A pause too long before she answered a question. A smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. A kiss that felt practiced. At first, I blamed it on exhaustion. We'd both been busy, her with her new work project, me trying to make up for lost hours after turning down that promotion. She told me she just needed space to think. I thought I understood. But space turned into silence. Her texts changed. Before, they'd been messy, full of typos and inside jokes. "You alive? Bring snacks," or "Miss your stupid face." Now, they are clean. Short. Clinical. Busy. Talk later. Can't make it tonight. Hope you're okay. No emojis. No warmth. Just, efficient. I'd reread them over and over, trying to find her in between the lines. When we did talk, she avoided my eyes. Lena used to look at me like she was reading a secret off my skin. Now, she stared at her phone, the wall, her coffee, anywhere but me. I'd catch her smiling at something on her screen, but when I asked, she'd lock it and say, "Work stuff." And I wanted to believe her. God, I did. But belief is fragile when you start to feel invisible. Then came the cancellations. We'd have plans, dinner, a movie, even a simple walk, and she'd bail at the last minute. Always the same vague reasons. Got caught up. Headache. Rain check. Once or twice, sure. Life happens. But after the fifth or sixth time, I stopped setting the table altogether. I'd sit there, staring at the two plates, the candles burning lower, the food going cold, waiting for the message I already knew was coming. It wasn't just me who noticed. One night, my friend Mason texted me. "Bro, I saw Lena downtown earlier. Thought you said she was out of town." I frowned, typing back. "She said she was working late." "Are you sure it was her?" "Pretty sure. It looked like she was with you though, lol." I stared at that message for a long time. With me? I wasn't there. I laughed it off at first, some random guy who happened to resemble me. Coincidences happen, right? But then another friend, Jess, said something similar a week later. "You and Lena looked cute the other day." I blinked. "What day?" "Tuesday. You were getting coffee at Marlowe's." I hadn't been anywhere near Marlowe's on Tuesday. That's when I started checking her social media. It felt pathetic, scrolling through every post, every caption, every filtered memory. Her pictures looked normal. Maybe too normal. But something was off. The captions. The timing. She started posting quotes, vague, melancholic ones. Sometimes, to find yourself, you have to lose everything. Change is painful, but staying the same hurts more. And the weird part? The posts echoed mine. A week earlier, I'd shared a photo of the lake we used to visit with the caption, "Peace feels like remembering who you are." Days later, she posted the same photo from a different angle. Her caption, "Peace feels like forgetting who you were." It was subtle, but deliberate, like she was rewriting our story, one mirrored post at a time. I decided to ask her about it. It was late, around 11 p.m., when I called. She answered after the third ring, her voice soft and distracted. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Can we talk?" "About what?" "I don't know. Us, maybe." There was a pause. Then a small laugh. "You're overthinking again, baby." "I'm not," I said quietly. "It just feels like you're somewhere else lately." She sighed. "Ethan, it's just work. I told you that. Don't make it into something it's not." "I'm not making anything, Lena. I'm just trying to understand." "Then stop trying so hard." Her tone wasn't angry, it was tired, dismissive. Like I was a chore she didn't have the energy to deal with. Before I could respond, she added softly, "I love you, okay? Go to sleep." And then she hung up. I stared at the screen, the hum of the dial tone filling the silence. That used to be enough, her saying "I love you." But now it sounded like punctuation. A period at the end of something I didn't realize was over. Days passed, and the distance grew louder. She texted less. She smiled less. She touched me like she was going through motions she'd already memorized. Sometimes she'd say things that felt eerily familiar. Lines I'd said months ago, phrases that once belonged to us. "Want me to make you coffee?" she'd ask one morning. "Sure," I said, smiling. "Just the way I like it, right?" She blinked. "How's that again?" I froze. She used to tease me about how I took it, one sugar, no milk. She'd called it sad coffee. But she just stared blankly now, like the memory had been erased. It wasn't just the coffee. It was everything. Her laugh sounded rehearsed. Her compliments came on a schedule. Even her apologies felt pre-written. It was like she'd studied a script of who we were and was now acting it out without feeling a word of it. Then came the night that burned itself into my mind. We were watching a movie, some old thriller she'd insisted on putting on. She sat beside me, head on my shoulder, scrolling through her phone between scenes. I looked at her, trying to memorize the curve of her smile, the way her hair fell across her face. I missed her, even though she was right there. "Hey," I whispered. "You okay?" She glanced up, distracted. "Yeah, why?" "Just checking." She smiled faintly. "You worry too much, Ian." The air left my lungs. "What did you just call me?" Her eyes widened instantly. "What?" "Oh, sorry. I meant Ethan." Slip of the tongue. "Ian." I repeated. "Who's Ian?" She laughed nervously. "No one. You know how my brain mixes things up sometimes." "It's late." But her voice cracked. And for the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it over and over. The way she said it, too natural to be random. Like the name had been sitting on her tongue for weeks. Who was Ian? A coworker? A friend? Someone new? I tried searching her socials again, nothing. She'd gone private. So I looked through old photos, old comments, trying to find something, anything. That's when I noticed the strangest thing. In one of her recent posts, just a casual selfie, there was a reflection in the glass door behind her. It was faint, blurry, but it looked like me. Or someone who could have been me. Same haircut. Same hoodie. Same phone. But I hadn't been there. My stomach dropped. The next day, I tried to talk to her again. She was distant, half listening, scrolling on her phone while I spoke. "Lena," I said carefully, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." She didn't look up. "Okay. Is there someone else?" She laughed, a dry, tired laugh that didn't belong to her. "Ethan, not this again. I'm serious. Just tell me." She finally met my eyes, and for a second, I saw pity there. "You really don't trust me, do you?" I swallowed. "I want to. But. Then stop searching for problems that aren't there. Then stop giving me reasons to," I snapped before I could stop myself. She went quiet. Her expression hardened. Then, almost too softly, she said, "Maybe you should stop trying to fix me, Ethan. Maybe I was never broken." She got up, grabbed her bag, and left. The door closed with a quiet finality that felt like the world folding in on itself. That night, I sat in the dark, replaying every moment, every word, every lie that might have been hidden behind her smile. My phone was silent. My reflection in the window looked back at me with eyes I didn't recognize. Was I losing my mind? Or was she living a double life, one where I didn't exist anymore? The thought lodged deep in my chest, sharp and cold. Something inside me whispered that this was only the beginning. It was a gray afternoon when everything finally came apart. The kind of day where the sky feels too close, heavy with the promise of something breaking. I hadn't planned to see her. In fact, I'd been trying not to. After our last fight, I told myself to give her space. To stop overanalyzing. To let her come back when she was ready. But she never did. 2 weeks of silence. Not a single message, not a call, not even a late night, "Miss you." So when I saw her name pop up in my "People You May Know" feed on a random photography account, one I didn't even use anymore, it felt like the universe was tugging at a thread. Curiosity. Stupidity. Obsession. Whatever it was, it pulled me straight to her. I saw her through the cafe window first. She was sitting by the glass, sunlight tangled in her hair, a half-empty cup in front of her. She looked calm. Too calm. And then I saw him. At first, I thought it was a trick of reflection, like I'd somehow caught my own image in the window. But then he moved. He laughed. Tilted his head exactly the way I did. Tapped his phone with the same nervous rhythm I always did when thinking. Same jacket. Same hair. Same phone case. My stomach twisted. I froze on the sidewalk, watching as she leaned across the table, touching his hand. She smiled, the smile that used to belong to me. Then I heard her voice through the muffled glass. Light. Carefree. Ethan, you're ridiculous. And that's when the world stopped. Because she wasn't talking to me. I couldn't breathe. My hands went cold. She said my name. My name. I stepped back from the window, heart pounding, mind spinning in circles that didn't make sense. It had to be a coincidence. A sick one, maybe, but a coincidence. Except it wasn't. When she laughed again, her hand brushed the same scar I had on my right wrist. I'd told her once how I got it, slipped while cutting wood as a kid. And the guy across from her? He had it too. The exact same scar. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my phone. My reflection in the cafe glass wavered beside theirs, two people living my life while I stood outside it. I don't even remember deciding to move. My body just followed. They left a few minutes later, still talking, still holding hands. I trailed them down the street, my steps quick but silent. My pulse thudded in my ears, louder than the city around me. She leaned her head on his shoulder, the same way she used to do with me when we'd walk home late from the movies. He said something, and she laughed. That same, unguarded laugh that once belonged to our private moments. I wanted to call out. To scream. To shake her and ask what the hell she was doing. But I didn't. Because I was too afraid of what she might say. They turned into a park. Sat on the bench near the fountain. I hid behind a line of trees, watching, heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. She was showing him something on her phone, our old photos. Photos of me. Only, something was wrong with them. I couldn't see the screen clearly, but from a distance, the faces looked blurred, like they'd been edited. She pointed, laughed, leaned close. He nodded, smiling, as if he recognized himself in the pictures. And that's when the realization struck. She wasn't with someone new. She was with me. Or at least, with someone who thought he was. The shock hit like a fever. Every thought blurred into the next, a storm of disbelief and nausea. Why? How? Who was this person? I stood there until the cold crept up my legs, until my vision pulsed at the edges. Then, without thinking, I pulled out my phone and tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. Texted her. We need to talk. No response. 5 minutes later, the message turned gray. Blocked. Instagram, blocked. Messenger, blocked. Email, bounced back. Every connection I had to her vanished. And just as I was about to throw my phone at the pavement, a single text appeared. Got a BF. Delete me. That was it. No explanation. No closure. Just digital silence and my reflection staring back at me from a blank screen. The world around me tilted. I went home, barely remembering how I got there. My apartment felt wrong, too quiet, too neat, too hollow. Her things were gone. Her toothbrush, her sweaters, the framed photo on the dresser. But what scared me wasn't what was missing, it was what was still there. Our old playlist on my laptop, still updated. Our shared photo albums, still active. Only when I opened them, I froze. The timestamps were off. Pictures we'd taken months ago now said, 2 days ago. Locations changed, from my city to another one entirely. In some of the newer ones, my face looked slightly different. Angles I didn't remember. Expressions that didn't feel like mine. It was like someone was editing the record of my life, rewriting it, piece by piece. I spent hours combing through everything, photos, videos, messages. And the deeper I dug, the worse it got. She'd reposted old captions I'd written, but altered them. My poetry drafts, my journal quotes, even small quirks like how I used to describe the rain. It was all there, but reworded, reframed. And in some twisted way, she was using those fragments of me to build this other version. Him. The copy. I couldn't sleep that night. My thoughts spiraled into places I didn't recognize. Had she planned this? Was it some sick experiment? Or had she just found someone easier to control, someone who fit her story better than I did? The questions clawed at me. By 3 a.m., I was pacing my living room, replaying every memory we'd shared, looking for cracks, hints, warnings. But all I found were echoes. Her voice said, "You feel safe, Ethan." Like an anchor. Her eyes, soft, vulnerable, saying, "Sometimes I feel like I'm living the wrong version of my life." It hit me then. Maybe I'd been her experiment all along. A prototype. A test version. I pulled up her page again from a fake account. She'd posted a new photo. Her, sitting at that same cafe. A hand in hers, cropped halfway out of frame. But the phone on the table had my exact case, black with a small crack near the corner. The caption read, "New Beginnings." And below it, a comment from the guy, "My everything red heart." His username? At Ethan.ln2. Not my handle. Not my profile. But close enough. A counterfeit. My body went cold. She hadn't just replaced me emotionally. She'd recreated me. Used my habits, my words, my life, copied and pasted into someone else until I was obsolete. And the terrifying part? No one seemed to notice the difference. Her friends commented like nothing had changed. Her parents still tagged her and Ethan. Except I wasn't there anymore. I was the glitch she deleted. For a while, I thought maybe I was losing it. I even checked the mirror, half expecting my reflection to flicker, to fade. Was I ever real to her? I whispered. Or just a template? The question haunted me. I wasn't sure which answer hurt more. If I'd been a copy of someone before me, or the original she decided to upgrade from. Days blurred together. I stopped going to work. Stopped answering friends. I spent hours scrolling through their profiles, studying him. He laughed like me. Dressed like me. Quoted my lines. Even captioned a post with one of my poems. Every new detail stripped something out of me until there was nothing left to recognize. But in that hollow space where heartbreak should have been, something else began to form. Not rage. Not grief. Something colder. Purpose. If she wanted perfection, I'd give it to her. If she wanted to play God with people's identities, I'd show her what it cost to create one. I closed my laptop, hands steady for the first time in weeks. If she wanted a copy, I whispered, staring at my reflection in the black screen, "I'll show her the cost of perfection." They thought I'd wither. They thought the quiet guy who'd begged and forgiven would fold and disappear. They were wrong. For 2 weeks I watched them like a ghost with a camera taped to his chest. Not because I wanted to hurt her, at first I thought I wanted answers, but because when someone steals the script of your life, you start by reading the pages they didn't give back. I learned fast what Ian had become. He wasn't some random man, he'd stepped into my shape and started living there. He answered my jokes. He knew, apparently, my history with a chipped mug and the nickname my cousin used. He showed up at my regular bar and laughed with people who had once known me. My friends complimented his manners as if he'd inherited them. Lena's mother hugged him like he'd always been her son-in-law. He sat in the chair I'd reserved and told the same dumb stories I'd told, as if polishing them until they sounded like mine. It wasn't just affection he'd taken. He'd taken my place on payroll too, appearing at meetings where I once presented. Maybe it was a favor from someone, maybe a careful editing of resumes and introductions. The mechanics didn't matter as much as the effect. Every small legitimacy he built pushed me further into the margin. I was a rumor, then an old address. People started using past tense when they spoke about me. I felt erased like a page rubbed away by a thumb. Anger sharpened into a plan, not because I wanted mess, but because I wanted the record set straight. I don't build bombs and I don't use knives, I rebuild the truth around her lies. I tell stories. I manipulate perception. That's what she'd done. She'd engineered a life by taking the details she wanted, stitching them into a new person, and rehearsing him until he fit her. So I began to gather. I made lists, names, places, times. I cataloged the photos she posted and what was missing from each. I traced the friends who liked and commented, not to stalk them but to map the social architecture she relied on. I didn't hack, the way a movie shows. I scraped public traces, called old acquaintances pretending to be concerned, recreated interactions by reading archived posts, and pieced together patterns. When she said, "New beginnings," it was a product launch, not poetry. When she posted a pixel-perfect selfie at noon, I cross-checked that timestamp against other posts and found the seams. It was tedious and methodical. I felt more alive with each small victory, a message recovered from a cached page, a comment she deleted but someone else had quoted. Evidence, small and scattered, that this wasn't spontaneous romance but a constructed narrative. A psychological experiment, maybe, Lena measuring whether mimicry of the right words and the right gestures could conjure love. She'd told me once, in a mood of quiet honesty, "Sometimes I want to know if feelings can be manufactured." I had whispered back that feeling wasn't a recipe. Turns out she treated it like one. Finding proof that she orchestrated things wasn't hard when you know where to look, it was hard when you don't want to see the cruelty behind the choreography. She'd been careful enough to avoid obvious traces, but careless with the human element, the people who couldn't help but brag a little, forward a screenshot, or make a joke that slipped into the open. A bartender's comment, a colleague's offhand remark, a tagged photo with a timestamp mismatch, those were my breadcrumbs. The pattern emerged. She'd bench-tested me and then tried to make the next man more convenient. She'd taken my writing style, little metaphors I used in texts, and fed them to him. She'd shown him my playlists and coached him on my laugh. She didn't just want a partner, she wanted predictability. The man she'd made was quiet in the right places, charming enough in others. The experiment, as I read the threads between the lines, was to see which version of Ethan could sustain love when stripped of messy authenticity. The hypothesis was monstrous: could a curated mimicry outperform the messy original? I'll be honest, there was a moment where the rage wanted to destroy everything. Not because I wanted to watch her burn, but because I wanted the world to notice what she had done. She had stolen my life's grammar and taught someone else to mimic my speech until the world applauded what it thought was authenticity. So I mirrored her. Not with business cards or a fabricated resume. I mirrored her tactics, psychological, social, surgical. I started by occupying the spaces she'd left open. If she'd reposted an old poem I'd written with a minor edit, I reposted it in its original form, pointed in public. If she'd coached him on how to joke at my favorite bar, I sat at the bar early and told the joke myself, watching faces that had already accepted him register the original. I created accounts that were careful reproductions of him, not to impersonate, but to plant seeds where they'd been watered. I commented on her posts with lines only she would recognize, phrases from the margins of a notebook she'd once left behind. The messages came back as private previews, she read them, and when she did, she flinched. I will not, under any circumstances, teach you how to break into private systems. I refuse to provide actionable methods for illegal activity. But in the story I lived, the work was about observation, social research, and using what people willingly shared against a polished illusion. I used what was public, what had been handed to me one way or another. I did not write code to open locked doors. I opened the ones she'd stepped through and left marks so others could see the path. That secrecy turned into a kind of art. I crafted anonymous notes, little mirror messages that echoed passages from her private journal, lines I'd read once when she dropped it and left the room for a minute. I'd never thought I'd weaponize intimacy, but she'd weaponized me first. I sent the notes from throwaway accounts, precise enough to unsettle but not so direct they could be pinned to me. Planting doubt is an odd skill. It doesn't explode, it irritates. It makes people check their reflections more often. I started slow, a tweet that quoted a line from her journal, a DM to a friend pointing out a mismatch between timestamps, a comment under a photo asking a casual question about a detail only someone close would notice. People noticed. They commented. The house of cards she had built started to wobble. At first, it worked like a tempering heat. He, the copy, blinked. He became uneasy in my old jokes, misstepping into cadence I'd used for years. She began to over-explain things, defensive, rehearsing answers. I watched her practice on camera like a woman shaping her testimony before a jury. There was a setback. She's smarter than I gave her credit for. She started to sniff the air. The anonymous accounts drew queries. She sent messages threatening to trace me. She asked friends if I'd been reaching out. She posted a carefully constructed live video of the two of them, laughing, to remind everyone she'd chosen. She tried to vaccinate her world with certainty. The first time she messaged one of my fake accounts demanding to know who I was, I felt a shiver of panic, old fear, bleeding back in. For the first time since the first text, I almost stopped. The urge to run back to the person who'd once held me in the dark was strong. But then I remembered the scar on her wrist she'd shown off like a badge of honesty, the way she'd called my name with such familiarity across that cafe window. I remembered how precise she'd been in erasing me and building a substitute. I continued. She escalated. She tried to assemble proof that someone was impersonating Ian online. She threatened to go to the police, to friends, to her parents. Panic made her sloppy. She started leaving more traces, photos too candid, messages left where they could be found. That's the paradox of control. The more people try to button down a story, the more seams they expose. When I showed Ian the same evidence she'd used to make him, the cached posts, the archived comments, the little edits, his face changed. He looked like a man realizing he'd been cast in someone else's play without consent. When I slid the last piece across the table, screenshots of her plans and private notes, he was speechless. He hadn't known, he'd been told. The way she presented him with a ready-made identity worked until he saw the puppet strings. He walked out. Not dramatically, no shouting, no scene. He left because he couldn't reconcile the person he thought he was with the detailed blueprint she'd been following. Lena watched him go with a face I didn't understand, equal parts fury and something that looked dangerously like fear. That night, she called me. Not blocked, not a curt text, an actual call, and the moment I picked up, her voice was thinner, telling me everything and nothing. "You don't understand," she said. "You make it sound like I engineered him." I didn't. "Then what was it, Lena?" I asked. My voice was calm. I had spent weeks learning the way to keep my hands steady even when they shook inside. "A favor? A coincidence? You said you wanted to start over. Did you start by copying me?" She laughed, a brittle sound. "I wanted to see if I could have a man who fit when I wanted him to. You were the model." I didn't think it would. Her sentence died like a bird. "You didn't think?" I echoed. "There are things you can't take back. There are identities that, once administered, leave indelible marks." I could have met her in the park, told her she'd broken me, begged her to be decent. But what I wanted was less petty. I wanted people to see what she had done the way I finally had, not as a love story but as a project with ethical violations. The man she created was gone. The man she feared was born. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I wanted to be seen, not as an artifact she'd thrown away but as a person who could choose whether to be kind or cruel. When you build an identity out of someone else's pieces, you should expect those pieces to be reclaimed. I decided I would be the one to reclaim mine. I kept my hands in my pockets the whole time I planned it, like keeping them hidden kept what I was doing from being monstrous. It didn't. It only kept my hands clean to everyone who hadn't watched me fold a life into a paper crane and set it to burn. When I say I enacted revenge, I don't mean I blew up buildings or scribbled slurs on billboards. This was quieter and, in its own way, crueler, a slow unmaking that used truth's own shape against the person who had used truth as costume. I wanted her to feel seen in the way she had never let me be seen, fully, without the veneer of a perfect narrative. The plan had 3 parts and I lived inside all of them until they were done. Part 1, Face to Face. Part 2, The Mosaic. Part 3, the finale, the public moment that would be both reveal and reckoning. I'll start with part 1 because that's where the small human things happened, where a man who'd nearly lost himself looked another man in the face and asked one simple question: do you know who you are? Ian met me in a coffee shop he'd taken to calling his own. I chose the place because Lena had favored it, because I wanted the setting to sting. He sat with the same slouch I always had, elbows on the table as if the world owed him space. He was younger looking up close than in photos, softer jaw, eyes like glass, and still, when he turned, I felt the old, animal coil of recognition, the way a thief recognizes the same lock he once picked. "Ethan," he said, as if asking was confirmation. He had my name at the tip of his mouth because she'd taught him to have it there, ready like a prop. I sat across from him and watched his hands. He spoke first about nothing, music, weather, the barista's new cold brew blend. Small talk is the scaffolding people use to test strangers for honesty. He was casual. He was nervous in the way of someone who knew he should be but wasn't sure how. "Listen," I said, dropping the scaffolding. I placed one of the printed pages on the table. It was a compilation, lines from her private notes, screenshots I'd rescued from cached pages, old messages where she'd first toyed with the idea of replicating feeling. It looked like evidence, because it was. He read them slowly. The rhythm of something shifting made the cafe sound like it was 12 feet away. "You don't have to do this," he said finally, his voice a small thing. "If what?" I asked. "If you were told lies? If you were bought a role?" The pronoun felt thin at that moment. "Do you see what this is?" He did. He swallowed. 2 quick gulps, as if the air itself had become bitter. That's when humanity came back to him, surprise, confusion, then that sickening recognition we feel when someone hands us our face in a mirror and explains how they carved it. "I didn't know," he said. "She told me you were, you. She said she wanted to fix me. He couldn't finish. He didn't have to. The discursive truth had been set within his chest, he had been molded to be someone's ease. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I gave him the documents and watched him fold them the way people fold things in church, slowly, reverently, then finally, with a look of apology at me as if I'd been the one to hurt him by being true. He left. Not with a slam, not with tears, but like a man who'd been handed a map to an exit he hadn't asked for but now desperately needed. Within 24 hours he'd texted her, "I can't. We need to talk." She replied with the practiced warmth of someone who already knew how to lie in a voice that sounded like truth. He didn't answer the second text. That was the first crack. Part 2, The Mosaic, is where the slow, ugly work lived. I assembled a story from fragments she had littered publicly and privately, made into a pattern anyone could read if given the right light. I want to be clear about something: I didn't break into locked accounts. I did not teach myself how to bypass security. I am not a hacker, and I refuse to write methods that could be used to invade someone's privacy. What I used were things people handed me, cached posts still visible through archive services, comments friends had copied and reposted, screenshots saved by inattentive people. Human slip-ups were my lever, a coworker who forwarded an excited message to a friend, a barista who forgot to hit the album privacy setting, a parent who posted a home video where she laughed with a clipped, rehearsed cadence. I compiled. I edited it. But editing here was not fabrication, it was juxtaposition. I took her words from different moments and placed them beside footage of her performing tenderness like a script. I intercut her journal entries, where she wrote about wanting repeatable affection, with clips where she taught the copy how I laughed, fed him my jokes, and handed him my anecdotes like props. The aggregate did the moral work. When held together, the mosaic was not accusation as much as illumination. There was a tricky ethical line I navigated each time I placed a clip next to a confession. I did not make up things she had never said. I did not stage scenes. Instead, I built a narrative through her own materials, my own heartbreak turned reflective. The collage flowed, Lena writing, "Can feeling be manufactured?" followed by a clip of her smiling at Ian as he mimicked the exact cadence I used in a joke about my father, a screenshot of her reposting a poem of mine with one word changed followed by a voice memo where she practices the phrasing with him until it fits. The montage read like a case file. It wasn't a smear so much as a mirror. People watch videos that show the truth and, for some of them, it is like waking from a fog. I titled the video with something neutral, clinically honest, replication, notes on a manufactured love. I uploaded it to a place where people who knew her, who hired her, who admired her work, might see it. I used public platforms, not private ones. I had found, in my weeks of obsessive watching, that public truth carries the weight of evidence without forcing the brutality of doxing. There is power in a story that pulls together what already exists and shows the pattern. Lena's first response was fury, short, panic-laced messages to friends asking for help, earnest denials that this was character assassination, rehearsed pleas, it's taken out of context. People who'd never known us believed her. That is always part of what it costs a person to be messy. Your mess is forgiving, a constructed narrative is neat and convincing. But the video dug into the seams. Colleagues watched. One forwarded it to another with the note, "Does this change how you view her startup pitch about emotional design?" Another replied, "I always thought it was a little performative." The cascade started where it always does, at the margins of casual doubt. A university contact rescinded a speaking invitation, citing that the attention would be distracting. A corporate email quietly flagged her in a human resources review. Her professional life, which had once promised her control and narrative, began to creak. And through all of it, the personal didn't stop. She called me once, at midnight, to voice a held and small thing. "You're hurting me," she said. I heard every yard of pain she'd inflicted on me in that one sentence. "You wanted a man who wouldn't surprise you," I told her. "You built one and threw the original away." "You're cruel," she said. I did not correct her. Cruelty and clarity are cousins. Part 3 was the finale and the place where I wanted the language of our lives to echo. I chose the cafe where I'd first seen them, the same bench by the window, the same streetlight reflection. I took a table where people could see me but not easily approach. The town had watched our little saga with an interest that made me ashamed, but also steady with the knowledge that a small, intimate crowd is still a crowd. I let the video do its work for a day. It went from a small public posting to a churn of reactions. People shared it with a mix of disgust and fascination. I watched the view count climb and felt the weird equilibrium of satisfaction and nausea that comes when the world witnesses what you've been living with for months. The reaction was not uniform, some called it cruel, others called it necessary. Both were true. On the second day, she came to the cafe. I knew it before she entered because the room's temperature shifted. People look for the drama of a face when a story is unfolding. She walked in like someone rehearsed stepping onto a stage. Her hair was pulled back. Her smile did not reach her eyes. "You posted that," she said, before I let her close enough to have the courtesy of an argument. "Yes," I said. "You're destroying me," she said, voice small and sharp. You destroyed me first, I replied. It was clinical. I had worked to make the clinical voice the one I used. It was less humiliating for me and, I hoped, more honest for her. You had no right, she insisted, eyes flashing with the outrage of someone who has always believed some ethical gradient only applied to other people. Right, I said. Right is relative. Morality is a conversation. You practiced being moral in front of a camera. Her jaw clenched. You think I engineered this? You think I made him into you on purpose? I think you wanted predictability more than honesty, I said. I think you taught someone to be me because it was convenient to hold a man who performed his love on cue. I think you believed you could measure feeling like you measure success. She looked at me like I'd given her a knife. Her face collapsed. I loved you, she whispered. I loved you, and I was scared. Love is a defense mechanism sometimes, it's also an admission. I wanted to believe the sentence meant something redeeming. But this was a person who'd used love as an experiment and then cast the subject aside. You can say you loved me, I said. But love and control are not synonyms. She barked a laugh that hurt. You think you're the only one who has been hurt? You think you're the only one who can break? Her breath quickened. What did you want me to do? Wait? Beg? Go on like nothing happened? You could have been honest. I felt my voice break and I blamed the long months of grief for it. Honesty could have been a bridge. Instead it had been a scalpel. She reached for me then, hands shaking, fingers like the last clinging threads of a kite in a storm. Who are you now, Ethan? She asked, the accusation in the question a plea. I let her grasp for something she'd once owned and found the rope roll. For months the question had lodged like a splinter in my skull, if I'm not him, then who am I? I'd been polished into surety by anger and reshaped by purpose. I'd been building myself outside of her definition. That night, in the Café Frost, I realized I could give her the only answer she would understand. Who you made me, I said. Those were the words that were both honest and brutal. She wavered as if my phrase were a tide she'd been standing in for months without noticing the pull. For the first time since the video, she couldn't gather a practiced response. And then she broke. It wasn't theatrical. There were no dramatic shouts, no public collapse. Her knees gave like a child who'd been running forever, and she slid down the chair, hands over her face. There was a wet, human sound, the kind that makes strangers look away because it makes them remember their own fragility. People at other tables pretended not to stare but leaned out like avian vultures, hungry for the end of a story. I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. Triumph tastes like metal, and I swallowed it with an aftertaste of ash. She cried for me in a way she had never once cradled me in real life. Her sobs were raw and unedited. Her hands shook as she clutched for some remnant of the script she'd written about us. People offered napkins, then took them back because the scene felt too intimate. A friend of hers, someone who'd supported her publicly, came close, murmured something, and helped her to her feet. They left together, her hair wrapped around her grain, like a woman learning that fallibility is not a performance to be rehearsed. I finished my coffee. It had gone cold. The taste was honest. Afterward, things didn't simply fall apart and stay that way. The online world moves on to the next scandal and the next trending outrage. Her career did take hits, some immediate, public, some quieter, like delayed promotions and unreturned calls. People who'd once praised her curiosity began to ask whether curiosity with no ethics was still curiosity or cruelty. But real consequences are weirder than social feeds. She called her mother and spoke in halting sentences. She sat through uncomfortable HR meetings. She sent messages that had been rehearsed so often they read like apologies without punctuation. In private, her world reduced in scale, the people who had enabled her drifted away. In public, she lodged statements, carefully worded, legally vetted. In the privacy of my mind I recognized the shape of someone shrinking from what they had made. And me? I did not return to the life I had lost in the same way. There is no clean resurrection from having been replaced. Some things die and become history. I had, at least, reclaimed my narrative. I had forced the world to look again at what had been done to me. That isn't healing. That's accountability, and it is not always sweet. On quiet nights, I think back to the man I saw walking away from the coffee shop the day I confronted him with the documents. He was not a villain. He was more of a casualty, someone used in a scheme that had ultimately hurt all of us. Ian's face populates my dreams sometimes, an apologetic ghost who keeps saying he didn't know. Lena's face is there too, but framed by the memory of that night in the cafe when she cried for what she had once called love. The revenge executed was not a thunderbolt. It was a sequence of small, exact cuts that made an image of what she had done. She felt it. Ian left. People saw. Consequences accrued. I walked out of the cafe with the cold in my lungs and the odd, slippery satisfaction of a task done. Yet satisfaction is not redemption. I do not recommend this path to anyone. The work I did ruled in a strict ethical gray, using public truths to reveal a pattern, nothing more. If the truth must come out, let it do so without needless cruelty. I tell you this because the human cost of vengeance can be quiet and deep and linger in the way your hands tremble when you're tired. That night, as I crossed the street, I felt a final small thing, a loosened weight where confusion had been. The question, who am I? Had not been answered with a label or a job or even the applause of strangers. It had been answered with action. I had refused to be erased. She had built a copy to love. In the process, she had forgotten that originals have the right to be messy. I walked away knowing this, she would remember me, not because I haunted her, but because she had made me into the thing she feared. That is a bitter comfort. It is also enough. When people ask me, months or years later, what the point of all of it was, I say the simplest thing I can: I wanted to be seen. I wanted the world to know that someone had tried to steal my shape. I wanted them to see her choice for what it was. People will argue about whether I was right to do what I did. I cannot answer them. All I can say is this: there are many ways to lose yourself. Some are gradual and soft. Some are loud. The only way I found myself again was to stop being the passive subject of someone's experiment and start being the author of my own life, even if that authorship was written in the dangerous ink of revenge. When she asked me who I was, in the cafe that last time, I gave her the only answer that mattered to her, the one she had helped create. And when I walked away, she was left with the knowledge she traded a messy, living love for a rehearsed simulation. That knowledge is a kind of punishment. It is not violent. It is precise. It leaves room for repentance, if one is ever sincere enough for it. I don't know if she ever learned to be honest. I do know she learned, at least, that truth has a way of assembling itself if you let it. And I, slow, quiet, unromantic Ethan, learned that you can survive being replaced if you choose to fight for the version of yourself that breathes and hurts and makes mistakes. That night the city felt ordinary again, buses hissing, neon through rain, couples holding hands with no idea what had happened in the cafe. I walked home with my jacket zipped up tight and the knowledge that, in the end, I had finally reclaimed my name. There's a certain silence that comes after everything collapses. It's not peaceful. It's not closure. It's the quiet hum of absence, the sound you hear when a storm has passed and you're standing in the wreckage, realizing it's over. That's where I've been living lately. I walk through familiar streets and they feel like film sets that have been abandoned. The lights are off, the props are still there, but the actors are gone. There's a coffee shop that still serves the same burnt espresso, a park bench with our initials carved into it, a corner of the apartment where her laugh still lingers, faint, ghostly. And me? I'm the only one left to remember how it used to sound. People think revenge gives you closure. It doesn't. It gives you perspective. It strips you of illusions. And when the dust settles, what's left is you, raw, unfiltered, unrecognizable. For the first few weeks after the video, I couldn't sleep. My body didn't know how to stop waiting for the next message, the next crisis, the next apology that never came. I'd wake up expecting her name on my phone, and every time it wasn't there, I'd feel both relief and disappointment. The strange part? I didn't want her back. I just wanted to know why she'd done it. Why she'd looked at me and seen something so replicable. So replaceable. I remember her once saying, "You're the kind of man who'd be easy to love twice." I thought she meant it as a compliment. Now I know it was foreshadowing. She didn't want to love me again. She wanted to recreate me, without the flaws, the questions, the unpredictability. She wanted warmth without the fire. And when she said I was replaceable, I believed her for a while. I believed that if someone could copy my smile, my words, my heartbeat, maybe I was just a collection of habits, not a person. But when you strip everything away, the love, the memories, the projections, what's left is what can't be copied, the pain, the mistakes, the guilt, the choices. That's what makes someone real. So, who am I now? I've asked myself that every morning since it happened. When I look in the mirror, I don't see the old Ethan, the quiet one who thought love meant holding on no matter what. That man's gone. He died the day she said, "Gotta BF. Delete me." What's left is something colder. Calmer. Someone who doesn't chase ghosts anymore. She wanted to create perfection. Instead, she created me, this version, the one that learned how to disappear and still be seen. The one that understood that being forgotten by someone like her isn't a loss. It's liberation. Sometimes, when I pass the cafe, I see the ghost of that moment, her sitting there with him, both of them pretending to be in love. I used to think it was my worst memory. Now it's my favorite. Because that's the day I realized something no experiment could measure. You can copy affection, but you can't copy soul. She said I was replaceable. Turns out she was too. The world has a funny way of erasing people who tried to erase others. Lena faded from headlines, from projects, from public view. I didn't need to destroy her life. She did that herself. All I did was hold up the mirror and make her look. And Ian? He moved away, changed jobs, deleted every trace of that chapter. I think he found peace in anonymity. Maybe I did too. Now, when people ask about my story, the breakup, the scandal, the video, I don't tell them everything. I just say, I learned that some people love you only as long as they can control you. That's enough. The rest live here, in the quiet. Sometimes, when I narrate my own thoughts, because that's what you do when you've spent too long talking to ghosts, I imagine it like a film. Soft music. Slow pan across a city at dawn. A man walking alone with his hands in his pockets, the streetlights flickering out one by one. And over it, my voice. If I'm not him, who the hell am I? I pause. Then I answer myself. Maybe no one. Maybe that's freedom. Because that's what this is, in the end, freedom. Not victory. Not vindication. Just release. The kind that comes after you've been torn apart and rebuilt by your own hands. I don't forgive her. I don't hate her either. She taught me something in the worst possible way, that identity isn't what others see in you, or even what they take from you. It's what remains when they're done. She built a copy to love. And I became the original she'll never forget.